Hey everybody, welcome back. It's me, Amanda. Thank you so much for watching today. Today is very special because I am celebrating 25 years of believing in my promise from God about my future husband, and it is my future husband's birthday this last Monday. So, um, my 25th anniversary was July the 25th, and then his birthday was Monday, so Nick, if you're watching, happy birthday, belated. So, in honor of this special moment, I thought I would share with you guys a passage from this book, The Miracle of Passover by Zola Levitt. And the passage I will be reading for you guys is the section about the first century Jewish custom of the bridegroom and yeah. So let us begin. Oh, you ready? Let's go. Oh no, I lost it. Okay. All right, I got. Back in Jesus's day and before, the Jews married differently than they do now. The young bridegroom would have to approach his chosen bride with a contract, a covenant of marriage, which they would both sign. There was money involved, which the groom, hang on, I need a bookmark. The groom would pay a bride price. In effect, the father of the bride would get the dowry. And at the signing, the groom would drink a toast with the bride. The cup of wine sealed the covenant. Then the groom would leave. He would tell the bride, I go to prepare a place for you, and he would return to his father's house. There he would build a bridal chamber, a little mansion where the couple would eventually have their honeymoon. Meanwhile, the bride waited at home, consecrated, set apart, bought for a price, until her bridegroom would come for her. She would be waiting all the time, every night, because her groom had paid a great price for her, and she was loyal and eager to be married, as all young girls are, of course. She would wear her veil whenever she went out so that the other young men would not try to make a contract with her, and she would especially emphasize purity and modesty in her time of waiting for her bridegroom. At home, she would keep an oil lamp and plenty of oil standing by, for her groom might well come at midnight, and she had to be ready to travel, even in the dark. In fact, that was the idea. The groom would try to surprise the bride by coming at an unexpected hour. All the Jewish brides were stolen, abducted, and they took great pleasure in the romance of it all. The Jews knew a thing or two about love. Over at the groom's house, things would progress as fast as the young man could build. He wanted to get married as soon as possible, too, but he would have to get his father's approval on the bridal chamber. He took his father's advice about the price to be paid for the bride, the suitability of the chamber, and the best time to go for the bride. And so, if you ask him during that year or so that when he was building, when's the big day? He would answer, only my father knows. Finally, the big day would come, and the groom with his groomsmen would slip over to the bride's home and steal her away. Now, there were rules about that. He couldn't just rush in and grab her without warning. After all, her hair couldn't be in curlers. There had to be a shout. Someone in the groom's party would shout something like, "Behold, the bridegroom comes," in order to properly warn the bride. When the bride heard the shout, she was as good as married. She and her sisters and her bridesmaids would quickly trim their lamps and get going. Her father and brother might just take a glance to be sure it was the young man with the contract, but otherwise everything would happen very fast. The bride would be spirited away to the chamber where the couple would shut the door. Wedding guests, friends of the groom's father, would already be assembled. But the celebration wouldn't really begin until the marriage was consummated within the chamber. The groom's best friend would stand near the door and listen for the groom's voice. The groom would tell him when the marriage was official. Then the crowd outside would let loose with a 7-day celebration. Woo-hoo! Getting invited to one of those weddings would be like drawing jury duty. Sometimes they ran out of wine and had to get more, or maybe someone would stop by and make some from water. Anyway, they all wanted to be present at the end of the week because the bride and groom would come out and there would be a grand feast called the marriage supper. Now, folks with the knowledge of the gospel could probably follow all that in the realization that Jesus performed every bit of it. After all, he was a Jewish bridegroom come to take a bride. He carried out the laws and customs of his people to the letter. Jesus approached us with a contract, the new covenant or New Testament, announced in Jeremiah 31, verse 31 through 34, and Hebrews 8, verse 8 through 12. This very advantageous contract for the bride stated that all the bride's sins would be forgotten. Jehovah had previously endured a difficult time with his wife Israel, who was adulterous. See the book of Hosea. And he, in effect, did what no man would do. He came back to the same bride with a new contract. How very forgiving he really was. God signed his covenants with men in blood. Abraham and Moses, for example, had to sacrifice animals as the signing of the Abrahamic and Mosaic covenants. And so Jesus came with his blood, ready to ratify God's new covenant with Israel. He drank the cup with his bride, stating clearly, "This is my blood of the New Testament," or New Covenant, same words, "shed for many for the remission of sins." Jesus found the price very high. He even said to his Father, "Remove this cup from me." Luke 22, verse 42. But he ultimately obeyed his Father. "Thy will, not mine, be done," and paid the high price anyway on the cross. We can imagine that some young Jewish bridegrooms were taken aback by the price of the girl they loved, but they invariably listened to their father's advice on this. Luke 22, verse 42 shows how much Jesus had to pay for us. Then Jesus told his bride, "I go to prepare a place for you." And he went to heaven to prepare our bridal chamber. Only his Father knows when he will come for us. But we're waiting. Consecrated, set apart, bought with a price. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 19 and 20. The Lord will come, as we saw earlier, with a shout, like that shout at Jericho, and even with a trumpet, which announces our freedom at last. Some think the trumpet means that Jesus will actually come for us on the Jewish Feast of Trumpets. And why not? He was crucified on the day of Passover, buried on the day of unleavened bread, raised on first fruits, and he sent the Holy Spirit on Pentecost. That's 4 feasts in a row with tumultuous happenings for the church. The next feast is trumpets. And nothing has happened to us on trumpets to date. The rapture of the church would be a fine fulfillment of trumpets, equal to the other stunning fulfillments on the feast days. Then presumably the second coming would occur appropriately on the Day of Atonement, when all Israel will be saved. Romans 11, verse 26. And the kingdom would start off right on tabernacles, when the Lord's tabernacle will be here on earth among us again. And that finishes the 7 feasts. In any case, we're still waiting for our bridegroom, listening for that shout. We have our oil in our lamps. Oil equals the Holy Spirit. And we'll be ready to go at a moment's notice. See Matthew 25, verse 1 through 13 for the story of those not waiting with their lamps and oil ready. We have our veils on. No one around us realizes what sort of covenant we've made, and the unbelievers don't realize for now that we're really promised to someone else. They keep trying to make all sorts of contracts with us that would violate the one we have with our bridegroom. But when we get back from the wedding, they'll know us. When the bride comes out of the chamber, she has her veil off, and everyone can see just who she was and what the contract was all about. When the bridegroom comes for us, we'll go into the judgment seat of Christ in heaven. 2 Corinthians 5, verse 10, and 1 Corinthians 3, verse 11 through 15. How's that for a honeymoon? Well, How is that like a honeymoon? Well, a honeymoon is where the groom removes the bride's veils and knows her secrets. Jesus will examine our works done in him and reward us accordingly in the chamber, when we are consecrated as his bride, he will announce that to his friend outside the door. And so John the Baptist told the mystified Pharisees, "He that hath the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom, which standeth and heareth him, rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. This is my joy, this my joy therefore is fulfilled." John 3, verse 28 and 29. Then all the wedding guests outside will celebrate. They will be friends of our bridegroom's father. So Abraham, Moses, David, Isaiah, and all his other friends who are up there waiting for this wedding. Won't that be a fine marriage supper? Daniel might sit by Jeremiah and say, I read your book. See Daniel 9, verse 2, and Jeremiah 29, verse 10. At last we'll be ready and consecrated, and we'll get to wear that wonderful white linen, which is the righteousness of saints. Revelation 19, verse 7 and 8. And we'll be the guest of honor at the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then, as was the custom, we'll depart from the groom's father's house. The bride and groom would leave his father's house after the marriage supper and set up housekeeping on their own. So we'll accompany the Lord back to earth to live with him in his kingdom. We are now the bride of Christ, but we shall someday be the queen of the kingdom. We'll reign with him, be submissive to him, of course, as the Christian wife is to her husband. What a promise. Now you know how to get married Jewish style. So, that's all I wanted to share with you today. I love this passage. I love how Zola Levitt shows us plainly how Jesus is our bridegroom. And I especially love this story because of how I personally am waiting for my personal bridegroom, and God has used this story many times to remind me that yes, he is going to fulfill his promise. And Nick, if you're watching, you are always welcome to fulfill the promise. And why don't you write me an email? Let's see, can you see it? I made this just for you. You can email me anytime. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you again in my next video. Remember to listen to God and do what he says. Okay, bye.